There's a certain kind of praise that doesn't warm your heart. It chills it. It arrives wrapped in politeness, but beneath the bow lies quiet resentment. You can hear it in their tone, sense it in their eyes, and feel it in the uneasy silence that follows. These are not compliments born of admiration. They are daggers dipped in sugar. They'll say, "What? You actually did that? I didn't think you could." And you're left smiling awkwardly, unsure whether to thank them or defend yourself. That confusion is the point. Their words are crafted to disguise hostility as humility, envy as encouragement. The compliment becomes a mirror that reflects not your success, but their insecurity. When someone close to you secretly resents you, they often lack the courage to express it openly. So they resort to covert hostility. The human mind, when filled with jealousy or suppressed anger, finds clever ways to release its tension without confrontation. A disguised insult hidden in a compliment is one of the most common outlets. It allows the person to maintain the illusion of kindness while still satisfying the shadow's desire to belittle. This type of person studies your reactions carefully. They test how far they can go without exposing themselves. Their compliments are experiments in control and emotional chess move. They want to see if you'll accept their subtle degradation as kindness, if you'll smile and swallow the discomfort just to keep the peace. Each time you do, they grow bolder. What's fascinating is that the tone often betrays the intention more than the content. The same sentence said with warmth could uplift you, but when said with coldness or a smirk, it slices through your peace. The subconscious always knows. You can sense the tension behind their eyes, the stiffness in their body, the slight delay in their smile. Their energy says what their mouth won't. Many people who offer these double-edged compliments are trapped in comparison. They live in a constant state of measuring themselves against others, and when someone close to them begins to rise, emotionally, financially, or spiritually, they feel their own inadequacy surface. Instead of confronting it, they project it. They'll disguise their jealousy as light-hearted teasing or concern, pretending it's all in good humor. But underneath, it's bitterness seeking validation. It's important to understand that these people don't necessarily hate you for who you are. They hate how they feel when they're around you. Your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Your confidence triggers their self-doubt. Your success forces them to face the parts of themselves they've neglected. So rather than celebrating your evolution, they find comfort in minimizing it. The irony is that their compliments often reveal more about them than about you. The tone of their praise exposes their internal conflict. The part of them that wants to be kind fighting against the part that wants to see you fail. You're witnessing the tension between their light and shadow, between admiration and envy. Psychologically, this dynamic thrives in close relationships, friends, co-workers, even family, because proximity amplifies emotion. The closer someone is to your life, the more they compare their path to yours. They see your achievements up close, your resilience, your ability to rise despite challenges. And if they're operating from insecurity, every success of yours feels like an indirect defeat of theirs. Compliments then become their weapon of choice, a polite form of emotional warfare. But the body knows what the mind tries to deny. You start noticing how your spirit tightens when they speak. You laugh, but it feels forced. You smile, but your chest feels heavy. You begin to second guess yourself after every conversation, wondering if you're overreacting. That confusion is part of their design. It keeps you trapped between self-doubt and guilt, between wanting to trust them and sensing that something isn't right. True admiration uplifts. It carries warmth, generosity, and sincerity. It doesn't sting, and it doesn't leave residue. When someone genuinely respects you, their words are free from hidden motives. They celebrate you without comparison, without subtle digs, without emotional games. Their praise feels clean, like sunlight, not smoke. The false compliment, however, always carries tension. It's not meant to build you up, it's meant to balance the scales in their mind. They can't bear feeling smaller, so they diminish you under the guise of politeness. It's a psychological strategy, an attempt to reclaim power in a dynamic where they feel overshadowed. In conversations like these, awareness becomes your greatest shield. Once you start recognizing the pattern, the sting begins to fade. You stop taking their tone personally because you see it for what it truly is: projection. Their words reflect their internal battle, not your worth. The moment you stop reacting defensively, the game loses its power. Some of these people will insist they didn't mean it that way, or that you're being too sensitive. They'll hide behind humor or sarcasm. But genuine kindness never needs clarification, and real friendship never leaves you confused about where you stand. If their compliments consistently make you question yourself, it's not your sensitivity that's the problem, it's their intention. People who secretly resent you often don't realize how transparent their energy becomes over time. Their envy bleeds through every laugh, every smirk, every backhanded phrase. They can pretend with words, but they can't fake vibration. Energy exposes what language tries to conceal. When you encounter these disguised insults, you don't need to argue or prove anything. Silence often disarms passive aggression better than confrontation. The moment you stop seeking their approval, you remove the fuel from their resentment. They may still pretend to compliment you, but now you'll see the illusion clearly. The sweetness will no longer taste the same. There's a silence that doesn't come from empathy, it comes from satisfaction. You can feel it in the stillness that follows when you share something painful with someone close. They nod, they murmur a few words of comfort, but beneath that quiet response lies something darker, a quiet sense of victory. Not because they wanted you to suffer, but because your stumble made them feel less small. When someone secretly harbors resentment toward you, they crave your imperfection. They long for proof that you're not as strong, successful, or composed as they imagined. Every time you fall, it restores their fragile sense of balance. Your failure becomes their relief. They might not admit it, but deep down, your struggle soothes the envy that eats at them. You'll notice it in the way they respond, or rather, in the way they don't. When you share good news, they vanish. When you share bad news, they're suddenly available. They appear calm, compassionate even, but the energy feels off. There's no genuine sorrow in their tone. It's a disguised curiosity, a quiet fascination with your pain. It's as if they've been waiting for the moment when life finally humbles you. People like this often keep a mental scoreboard of your life versus theirs. When you rise, their insecurity flares. When you stumble, they feel peace. It's an unconscious trade-off. They can only feel worthy when you don't. That's why your struggles are secretly satisfying to them. It's the one time they feel equal or superior without having to change anything about themselves. You may have noticed the faint smile they try to hide when you tell them something went wrong, the slight sparkle in their eyes when you mention a setback, the half-hearted, "Don't worry, you'll bounce back." That sounds more like a prediction than encouragement. These small details expose the truth. They're not mourning your pain, they're measuring it. The psychology behind this is rooted in comparison and self-protection. People who feel inadequate often cope by seeking flaws in others. It's easier to feel whole when someone else appears broken. So when you're doing well, you unknowingly become a threat to their fragile ego. But when life tests you, they feel reassured that you're human after all, that your light isn't untouchable. This is why their silence during your achievements feels as loud as applause during your failures. They'll scroll past your victories online, but privately replay your mistakes in their mind. They won't openly mock you, but they'll replay your losses like comforting music. Your struggle becomes their proof that success isn't permanent, that maybe the world is fair after all. Some of them even offer support that subtly reinforces your pain. They might say, "I knew something like this might happen, but I didn't want to say anything." Or, "It's okay. Not everyone can handle what you were trying to do." These aren't comforting words. They're disguised confirmations of their private belief that you were bound to fail. Their empathy feels hollow because it's not built on care, but on quiet validation of their own worldview. The most revealing part is not what they say, but how they behave afterward. After your failure, they seem lighter, more talkative. Suddenly, the tension that existed when you were doing well disappears. They become warmer, more comfortable, as if your setback restored equilibrium. They start checking in more often, not out of concern, but to ensure you're still down. It's not connection, it's surveillance. If you pay attention, you'll also notice how they subtly remind you of your past mistakes. Not to motivate you, but to keep you small. They bring up your failures in conversations, disguised as jokes or lessons. "Remember when you tried that and it didn't work out?" They'll say with a smile. To them, your pain is a story worth retelling because it keeps them in the role of the safe observer while you play the struggling protagonist. What makes this behavior especially painful is that it often comes from people you trusted, friends, co-workers, family, the ones who once clapped for you. You expect strangers to doubt you, but not those who've shared your laughter. That's what makes the silence so haunting. It's not the absence of noise, it's the presence of hidden satisfaction. Deep down, you start to feel it, the way their energy shifts when things are going well, the subtle withdrawal when you're thriving, and the sudden reappearance when you're vulnerable. You begin to recognize that their care depends on your condition. They're not there because they love you. They're there because your struggle makes them feel safe. In many ways, these people fear your success more than they hate your failure. When you rise, you challenge the identity they've built around being the realist, the humble one, or the voice of reason. Your victories threaten their comfort zone, but your failures, those keep them anchored. They reassure themselves with your missteps, telling their minds that maybe, just maybe, they were right not to try as hard as you did. So they celebrate in silence, not with parties or smiles, but with internal relief. And though they may never admit it, their energy confesses it for them. You can feel the subtle satisfaction behind their sympathy, the hidden smirk behind their "I'm here for you." It's not love. It's a quiet hunger to see you just low enough to no longer disturb their fragile peace. There are people whose presence feels like a weight pressing on your spirit. You can't explain it logically, but every time they walk into the room, something in you tightens. The air feels thicker, your mood drops, and the lightness you carried moments ago suddenly fades. That's not imagination, it's energetic truth. Human beings exchange more than words. We exchange emotion, vibration, and unspoken tension. And when someone secretly resents you, their energy speaks long before their mouth does. They might smile, ask how you've been, or pretend to care, but their presence betrays the truth. The tone feels off. The timing feels strange. You sense that beneath their polite gestures lies something cold and unwelcoming. Their words are coated in honey, but the vibration is metallic. You walk away feeling drained, like a piece of your calm was quietly taken without permission. That's because energy, unlike words, doesn't lie. It reveals everything the ego tries to hide. When someone close to you secretly dislikes you, their body reacts even when they try to mask it. Their posture stiffens around you, their tone becomes forced, their eyes avoid yours or linger too long in discomfort. Their unconscious mind leaks what their conscious mind is trying to conceal. You don't need to analyze it, you feel it. And that feeling is your intuition warning you that something isn't right. Psychologically, this happens because suppressed emotions don't disappear, they radiate. When a person harbors envy, anger, or bitterness towards someone they must still interact with, that tension spills out as emotional heaviness. They might not speak ill of you, but the hostility lives in their energy field. It's in their sighs, their micro-expressions, the awkward silences that feel loaded with unspoken judgment. You can sense that they're withholding something, approval, love, honesty, and then that withholding manifests as invisible friction. You'll often notice that conversations with them one-sided. You speak, but they don't really listen. You share something exciting, and they respond with minimal enthusiasm or redirect the topic toward themselves. Their lack of genuine engagement leaves you feeling unseen and energetically empty. It's not what they say, it's the absence of warmth behind it. Their energy operates like a closed door. You knock, but nothing opens. When you spend time with such people, your nervous system begins to pick up subtle cues of threat. You become more self-conscious, second-guessing your words, adjusting your tone, trying to maintain harmony. Without realizing it, you start managing their mood, softening your own energy so you don't trigger their hidden hostility. That self-protection drains you. By the time you leave, you feel exhausted, not because of the conversation itself, but because of the silent emotional work your body was doing to keep the peace. This heaviness can be especially confusing when it comes from someone you love or trust. On the surface, they haven't done anything wrong. They may even claim to support you. But your spirit senses the dissonance. Their affection feels transactional. Their laughter sounds rehearsed. Their presence lacks ease. It's as if you're standing next to a wall of invisible judgment. One that smiles but doesn't soften. What makes this energy so potent is that it doesn't require words to affect you. The subconscious communicates through sensation. You feel a knot in your stomach when they approach. You notice that your breathing becomes shallow. You start doubting yourself more after being around them. These physical reactions aren't coincidence. They're your body's intuitive alarm system. It knows when it's in the presence of concealed hostility, even if your mind tries to rationalize it away. Some people emit this heaviness because they're carrying unresolved pain of their own. Your peace reminds them of their chaos. Your growth mirrors what they haven't faced. Instead of seeking healing, they project discomfort outward, making others feel what they refuse to feel within. Their energy becomes dense, a fog of repressed emotion that clings to every interaction. And when you step into that fog, your light starts to dim, not because you're weak, but because your sensitivity registers their inner storm. You might try to fix it at first. Be kinder, more understanding, more patient, hoping that warmth will dissolve the tension. But no matter how much empathy you offer, their energy doesn't change because it's not about you. It's about what they're battling within themselves. They carry resentment like a frequency, and every time you step into their orbit, your energy tries to harmonize with it. The clash between your light and their shadow creates emotional gravity. That's why you feel the weight. It's the pressure of misaligned vibration. Over time, prolonged exposure to such energy can make you doubt your intuition. You start wondering if you're imagining things, if you're being overly sensitive or judgmental. But intuition isn't paranoia. It's perception without words. When you consistently feel emotionally drained around a specific person, that's not coincidence. It's resonance. Their energy field is heavy because it's filled with unspoken resentment, and your sensitivity is simply translating what your logic cannot. The heaviness is their unexpressed truth pressing against your peace. It's their discomfort leaking through smiles, their jealousy hiding beneath politeness, their inner chaos camouflaged by charm. You sense it not because you're suspicious, but because energy always tells the truth. There's a strange discomfort that creeps in when someone starts mirroring your every move. At first, it feels flattering. You think they're inspired by you, your style, your thoughts, your growth. You tell yourself it's admiration. But slowly, something about it begins to feel off. The imitation stops feeling like appreciation and starts feeling like invasion. It's no longer about connection, it's about competition. You notice how they adopt your phrases, your tone, even your mannerisms. They start showing interest in the same things that once made you unique. At first, it feels coincidental, but soon, the pattern becomes undeniable. They don't just follow your path, they walk in your footprints. Yet behind every copied gesture lies an unspoken motive to match or surpass you, not to understand you. Imitation, in its healthy form, is natural. We all learn through reflection. Children mimic their parents, students echo their teachers. But when imitation carries envy beneath it, it becomes a psychological weapon, a way of erasing your individuality by replicating it. When someone secretly resents you, copying becomes their way of reclaiming power. If they can become what you are, they no longer have to feel inferior. These individuals rarely acknowledge that they're copying. Instead, they convince themselves that they're inspired or influenced. But inspiration creates originality. While envy breeds duplication, they don't want to grow from your example. They want to be the example. Their imitation becomes an unconscious strategy to compete silently, to prove to themselves and others that they can do it just as well, if not better. You start noticing subtle shifts. The hobbies you once loved suddenly become theirs. The ideas you shared in confidence appear in their conversations as if they were their own. The way you dress, the music you enjoy, even the small quirks that make you you, they begin mirroring them almost perfectly. But what unsettles you most is the emptiness behind it. The imitation lacks soul because it's not born of genuine connection. It's driven by comparison. Psychologically, this behavior stems from insecurity and identity confusion. When someone hasn't developed a stable sense of self, they look to others to define who they should be. But instead of admiration, what they often feel is jealousy toward the person who seems confident, authentic, or successful. Imitation becomes their survival tactic. They borrow your traits in hopes of borrowing your power, yet what they don't realize is that true confidence cannot be copied. It can only be cultivated. This kind of mimicry creates an invisible tension in the relationship. On the surface, things appear normal. They'll compliment your ideas, claim to share your passions, and act like your biggest supporter. But deep down, it's not support, it's surveillance. They're studying you, gathering details, learning how to move like you, speak like you, even think like you. And over time, you start to feel emotionally crowded, as though your identity is being quietly consumed. There's a certain exhaustion that comes from being mirrored by someone who's secretly in competition with you. It's not the flattery of being admired, it's the discomfort of being observed. You feel their eyes on your choices, their subtle attempts to keep up. You might even catch them trying to outdo you in the very areas they once praised you for. They don't want to share your light. They want to wear it to make it their own reflection. What makes this dynamic particularly painful is that it often begins from closeness. It's usually someone who claims to care deeply for you, a friend, a coworker, sometimes even a family member. Their imitation begins as alignment, but slowly turns into rivalry. They may still smile and speak kindly, but their actions reveal something else, a hunger to prove they're not behind you. They crave equality, but not through growth, through duplication. When you confront this type of person, they'll often deny it or play innocent. They might say things like, oh, you're imagining it, or we just have similar taste. But beneath that denial lies fear, the fear of being exposed for what their imitation really is, an expression of insecurity. They need to convince you and themselves that what they're doing is harmless. But deep down, they know it's not admiration that drives them. It's comparison poisoning connection. Energetically, their presence begins to feel suffocating. You no longer feel free to express yourself fully because you know they'll absorb it. You hesitate to share ideas or express excitement because you've learned they'll echo it as their own. Their mimicry becomes a kind of theft, not of possessions, but of identity. They want your aura without your authenticity, your outcome without your effort. Over time, you realize that their imitation isn't about wanting to be like you. It's about wanting to replace you. They believe that if they can mimic your light closely enough, others will stop seeing the difference. But the truth is, imitation can never capture essence. You can copy appearance, words, and actions, but you can't replicate the energy that creates them. What their imitation truly reveals is that they see you not as a person, but as a rival. To them, you are a mirror that reflects everything they wish they could embody. Instead of facing their own potential, they try to borrow yours, hoping no one will notice the difference. And while they may manage to imitate your form, they can never reproduce your frequency, because authenticity is not something that can be stolen. It is something that must be earned from within. There's a certain kind of person who reacts to your dreams not with excitement, but with subtle resistance. You tell them about a goal that ignites your soul, and instead of encouragement, you receive hesitation disguised as concern. They say things like, "Oh, that sounds great, but don't get your hopes up," or "Be realistic. Not everyone gets to live like that." Their words seem gentle, but their intention carries weight, the kind that presses your ambitions down until they feel small enough to doubt. When someone secretly resents your growth, they rarely oppose your dreams openly. Instead, they chip away at them quietly, using logic, sarcasm, or honesty as weapons. They'll position themselves as the voice of reason while subtly poisoning your enthusiasm. You walk away from the conversation feeling a little more uncertain, a little less alive. And that's exactly what they want, to dim the fire that threatens to outshine them. This behavior often comes from insecurity disguised as wisdom. People who have given up on their own dreams can't stand to see someone else still chasing theirs. Your courage becomes a mirror that reflects their inaction, so they do what feels safest. They try to pull you back to their level. Their advice, though wrapped in care, is really a projection of their fear. They're not protecting you from disappointment. They're protecting themselves from discomfort. You'll notice how they frame their responses. When you share your vision, they focus on the obstacles instead of the possibilities. You say you want to start a business, and they tell you about how many fail. You talk about traveling the world, and they remind you how dangerous it can be. You express your creative passion, and they laugh softly, as if it's Navi each time. Their words are soaked in quiet disbelief. They can't celebrate what they don't understand, and they can't believe in what they've stopped believing in themselves. There's a subtle psychology behind their discouragement. The moment you start pursuing something meaningful, you disturb the equilibrium of your relationships. People who are content with mediocrity feel safe as long as everyone around them stays the same. But your growth challenges that stability. Your ambition confronts their complacency. It forces them to question why they stopped trying, and that discomfort quickly turns into resistance masked as advice. What's dangerous is how persuasive their tone can be. They sound calm, rational, even caring. They'll say, "I just don't want you to get hurt," or "I'm only saying this because I care." But underneath the compassion lies a quiet satisfaction in watching your confidence waver. They don't want to see you fail completely. They just want you to stay manageable, to keep your dreams small enough that they don't have to feel threatened. Over time, this dynamic can wear down even the strongest spirit. You start editing your excitement when you're around them. You share less, dream quieter, and shrink your ideas before they can be criticized. You learn to hide your enthusiasm because it feels safer than having it mocked. And slowly, you begin to internalize their limitations as your own. That's how silent sabotage works. It doesn't destroy you in one blow. It drains you through 1,000 subtle doubts. It's not always intentional cruelty. Sometimes they genuinely believe they're helping, their worldview has become so shaped by fear and failure that they can't imagine success beyond their own boundaries. When they tell you that's not possible, what they really mean is, it wasn't possible for me. Their disbelief is self-reflection, not prophecy. But when you don't recognize that, you start to mistake their pessimism for truth. You'll notice how their words often come right after your moments of excitement. You share a breakthrough, and they immediately offer a counterpoint. They can't allow your energy to rise too high because it threatens the comfort of their own stagnation. Every time they downplay your dream, they're trying to regulate your emotional altitude to bring you back to the level where they feel safe. They need you to doubt yourself so they can continue avoiding their own unrealized potential. There's a heaviness in conversations with people like this. You feel your energy dim without understanding why. You walk in with clarity and leave with confusion. You start to question whether your vision is too big, too risky, too unrealistic. But what's actually happening is that their limitation is trying to rewrite your belief system. Their skepticism is an emotional contagion. It spreads through tone, not just words. People who downplay your dreams often use humor as a mask. They'll laugh at your ideas, make jokes about your plans, or tease you for being too idealistic. But behind every joke lies truth. Mockery is the ego's way of defending itself from admiration. By making light of your ambition, they reduce its power to inspire them. Because inspiration would require change, and change terrifies them. You begin to see the pattern clearly once you distance yourself emotionally. Their doubt isn't about you. It's about what your growth represents. You're a living reminder that it's still possible to start, to risk, to hope. And that reminder feels unbearable to someone who's already buried their own potential. So they downplay your dreams to protect the illusion that giving up was the right choice. Their words sound reasonable, but their energy tells the truth. It doesn't lift you, it lowers you. It doesn't expand you, it confines you. What they call realism is often fear wearing intelligence as armor. And when you recognize that, you start to understand that their disbelief isn't a warning, it's a confession. There's a special kind of duplicity in those who wear kindness like a costume. They know when to smile, when to appear generous, when to act like the embodiment of compassion. But only when there's an audience. The moment the lights fade and no one's watching, the warmth disappears. Their kindness isn't a reflection of their heart. It's a performance crafted to maintain an image. They don't care about doing good. They care about being seen doing good. You'll notice the shift if you pay attention. In public, they're charming, considerate, and full of empathy. Their voice softens, their gestures expand, their presence glows. They say all the right things, always at the right time. But when the crowd thins, when it's just you and them, that polished exterior starts to crack. Their tone changes, their patience fades. The tenderness that seems so natural becomes conditional. They were never kind, they were performing kindness. This behavior stems from a deep need for validation. For such people, goodness isn't an inner truth, it's a social currency. They measure morality not by intention, but by recognition. They need to be seen as compassionate because it gives them control over how others perceive them. Their kindness is strategic, a tool to gain admiration, trust, or influence. But once they've earned that image, They don't bother living up to it behind closed doors. You can often tell who these people are by how they treat those who can't offer them anything in return. When others are around, they act generous to service workers, speak about empathy, and publicly praise humility. But in private, they speak harshly, complain about those same people, or act as though basic decency is beneath them. Their goodness exists only where applause can reach. It's not a character trait, it's a carefully managed reputation. When someone's kindness is genuine, it doesn't shift with the environment. Real empathy flows consistently, it doesn't require witnesses. But when kindness is a facade, the energy behind it always feels slightly performative. You can sense the calculation in their gestures, the timing of their compliments, the subtle glance toward others after they say something nice. They're not connecting, they're performing sincerity. And like any performance, it loses life once the audience disappears. Psychologically, this duality reveals deep insecurity. People who depend on external validation build their sense of worth on perception rather than authenticity. They fear being invisible more than being false. So they construct a persona of goodness, one that gains approval but doesn't demand genuine transformation. Their kindness becomes a shield that hides the emptiness underneath. They need to look like a good person because they don't feel like one. This kind of selective kindness often shows up in relationships too. In front of others, they're affectionate, attentive, and full of praise. They want the world to see them as devoted and loving. But in private, their tone grows cold. They become distant, critical, or dismissive. You start to feel like their affection is only real when someone else is watching. It's not love, it's image management. They love the idea of being seen as a good partner more than they love the person beside them. Over time, this behavior creates emotional confusion. You begin to question your perception because what others see doesn't match what you experience. To the outside world, they appear flawless, kind, selfless, admirable. But behind the scenes, their true nature emerges in small, cutting ways indifference, manipulation, or silent withdrawal. And because they've built such a convincing public mask, you fear that no one would believe you if you spoke the truth. This duality reveals a deep fragmentation within them. They live divided between who they are and who they pretend to be. The persona they present to the world feeds their ego, while their private behavior feeds their shadow. Over time, they become addicted to the validation their public image provides. They need people to see them as kind because it distracts them from the guilt of not being kind. It's not about moral integrity, it's about emotional survival. You can spot this pattern in their relationships with authority or social circles. When someone important enters the room, they transform. Their posture straightens, their voice becomes softer, their words flow with charm. But as soon as that person leaves, they revert, the mask slips. The difference between their public tone and their private one is so stark it almost feels like watching two different people. That's because it is. One is the performance, the other the truth. Their kindness also tends to surface most strongly when it can elevate their status. They'll volunteer, donate, or help others, but only when there's recognition attached. They need witnesses to validate their worth. And they chase opportunities to display morality like someone showing off jewelry. Yet genuine kindness doesn't seek visibility. It doesn't need acknowledgement. True empathy exists quietly, without audience or applause, but to them, silence feels like invisibility, and invisibility feels like death to the ego. If you've been close to someone like this, you know the emotional exhaustion that follows. You never know which version of them you'll get. You start adjusting your behavior depending on whether others are around, just to keep the peace. Their inconsistency creates a tension that you can't explain but can always feel, because authenticity radiates calm, but falseness leaves residue. It drains the space, leaving you heavier than before. What makes this so insidious is that others rarely see the truth. To the outside world, they're admired. People praise their kindness, their generosity, their humility. You, however, see the other side, the coldness when no one's around, the manipulation hidden behind politeness, the indifference that replaces warmth once the audience is gone. It's a loneliness that comes from knowing a truth the world refuses to see, a truth hidden behind the practiced smile of someone whose kindness only lives under the spotlight. There's a certain art to how some people speak ill of others while pretending to care. They don't come with open malice, they come cloaked in concern. They use phrases like, "I'm only saying this because I care," or "I just want you to know the truth," when in reality, what they want is to plant a seed of doubt, of judgment, of quiet division. These are the people who gossip in disguise, the ones who masquerade as protectors but thrive on subtle chaos. They spread information not to enlighten, but to manipulate how others see you. This form of gossip is the most poisonous because it hides behind sincerity. They appear to be honest, even compassionate, but their words carry an undercurrent of control. Their tone is soft, their eyes empathetic, but the message they deliver reshapes reputations and warps relationships. They rarely say anything overtly cruel. Instead, they weaponize subtlety, they hint, they imply, they let their silence linger after suggestive comments. Their goal isn't to attack directly, it's to make you doubt who's truly on your side. You'll notice their language often begins with disclaimers. "I probably shouldn't say this, but," or "don't take it the wrong way, but." These are linguistic masks, ways to sanitize what follows. They know how to lace criticism with sweetness, so it sounds less like gossip and more like guidance. Yet the effect is always the same. Someone walks away doubting another's character, and the gossiper walks away feeling powerful. For them, words aren't just conversation. They're instruments of quiet control. The psychology behind this behavior is rooted in insecurity and envy. Gossip disguised as concern allows them to feel morally superior while feeding their need for relevance. They crave to be the one who knows things, who has insight others lack. It gives them importance in social circles, a sense of influence over how people perceive one another. But underneath it lies fear, the fear of being unseen, irrelevant, or powerless. Gossip becomes their way of feeling significant in a world that might otherwise overlook them. They're skilled at timing. They choose their moments carefully, never when you're too alert, never when the room feels too heavy. They wait for a lull in conversation, a flicker of curiosity, a hint of vulnerability. Then, with a sigh or a concerned glance, they drop a harmless comment. "I'm just telling you what I heard," they'll say, washing their hands of accountability while igniting a fire they fully intended to start. They act innocent, as though the consequences of their words are beyond their control. but deep down, they know exactly what they're doing. One of their favorite disguises is empathy. They'll listen attentively, nod with care, and mirror your emotions, all to gain your trust. Once you start confiding, they extract your truths, dress them in distortion, and share them elsewhere as stories of worry or observation. They'll never admit it's gossip because, in their mind, gossip means malice and they're just being real. They convince themselves they're doing others a favor by sharing information that others deserve to know. In truth, they're feeding on connection by breaking it. You'll often find that they never speak the same way in every room. With one person, they express concern about you. With another, they claim they're defending you. They tailor their words to fit the audience, making everyone feel like they're the trusted confidant. This creates an illusion of intimacy while quietly turning people against one another. They play both sides because division gives them leverage. As long as people are confused, the gossiper remains in control of the narrative. Their disguised gossip can even sound like praise. She's doing really well now, though I heard it took a lot for her to get there. He's so confident these days, maybe a little too confident. Compliments laced with contrast. It's not about the words themselves, but the tone, the inflection, the subtle pause, as that suggests more than is said. They know how to praise with one hand and poison with the other, leaving a faint trail of suspicion that sticks long after the conversation ends. You'll recognize them by how they react when confronted. They'll retreat behind defensiveness or false innocence. I didn't mean it like that. They'll insist, or you're being too sensitive. They rely on confusion to protect themselves. Their weapon is plausibility. They say just enough to wound, but never enough to be called out. This ambiguity is their armor. They operate in emotional gray areas where intent can't easily be proven, and that's exactly where they thrive. Being around someone who gossips in disguise creates an invisible tension. You start questioning what they say about you when you're not there. You become cautious with your words, careful with your trust. Over time, it drains your peace because authentic relationships are built on transparency, and gossip, no matter how well disguised, turns transparency into theater. Every smile begins to feel like a performance, every conversation like a test of loyalty. Those who gossip under the veil of care often justify it by calling themselves truth tellers. But truth without integrity is still deception. They manipulate facts to fit narratives that keep them at the center of attention. Their words fracture bonds that might otherwise have healed. And though they appear harmless on the surface, their whispers shape the emotional climate of every room they enter. They gossip not to connect, but to control, not to reveal truth, but to redirect it toward their own quiet advantage. There's a strange phenomenon that reveals itself in certain relationships. The quiet competition of suffering. Some people don't measure worth in growth, success, or strength, but in pain. They treat struggle like a trophy, as if whoever has suffered most deserves the most sympathy, attention, or validation. Instead of healing, they turn wounds into currency. Instead of supporting your progress, they compare their pain to yours, ensuring they never fall behind in the hierarchy of misery. You'll notice it when you share something vulnerable. Maybe you open up about a difficult experience, hoping for empathy. Instead of listening, they interrupt with, "That's nothing. You should hear what happened to me. It's not cruelty, it's competition disguised as connection. They don't want to comfort you, they want to out-suffer you. Your pain threatens them because it shifts attention away from theirs. So they reclaim the spotlight by amplifying their struggle, turning every conversation about hardship into a silent battle for emotional dominance. This dynamic reveals a deep psychological insecurity. For such individuals, identity is built around being the victim. Their suffering gives them purpose. It's how they feel seen, validated, and important. If they're not the one hurting most, they fear becoming irrelevant. Pain becomes their proof of existence, their way of saying, "Look how much I've endured, therefore I matter." But in doing so, they become addicted to the role of the wounded rather than the healed. They compete in pain because progress threatens to make them ordinary. When you start to rise, to grow, to heal, they sense danger. Your evolution highlights what they've refused to confront in themselves. Instead of celebrating your growth, they diminish it. They might say things like, "It's easy for you. You don't know what real struggle is." Or, "I wish I had your luck." Beneath those words lies resentment masked as self-pity. They use comparison as a way to pull you back into emotional stagnation, because as long as you're both hurting, they don't have to face their own lack of progress. Their competition isn't about who's doing better, it's about who's been hurt worse. And that mindset turns every moment of vulnerability into a contest. If you're sad, they're devastated. If you're tired, they're broken. If you've been betrayed, they've been destroyed. There's always a one-upmanship to their suffering. They unconsciously use pain as leverage in relationships, believing that whoever suffers more deserves more love, more patience, more validation. But in truth, what they crave isn't empathy, it's emotional control. This habit of competing in pain also keeps them trapped in cycles of misery. They replay their traumas like badges of honor, telling the same stories again and again, not to process them, but to reaffirm their identity as the one who's endured the most. Progress feels threatening because it demands accountability. It asks them to move forward, to let go of the comfort that comes from being pitied. Healing would mean losing the attention they've built their world around, and for many, that loss feels unbearable. They might also use emotional comparison as a way to invalidate your feelings. When you express that something hurt you, they respond with dismissive comparisons. "You think that's bad? At least you didn't go through what I did." These statements are subtle but corrosive. Over time, you start to question whether your pain even counts, whether your emotions are valid. They train you to minimize your struggles, all while magnifying their own. In their world, empathy is a one-way street. You'll often sense a heaviness around them, a kind of draining energy that makes it difficult to express joy or gratitude, because to them, happiness feels like betrayal. They equate healing with arrogance and positivity with denial. If you celebrate a small victory, they respond with reminders of their suffering. If you share excitement about the future, they anchor the conversation in the past. Every moment of light threatens the narrative they've built around darkness, and so they pull you back into the shadows where they feel safest. Their emotional competition also serves as a defense mechanism. By staying fixated on pain, they avoid confronting responsibility. They can blame circumstances, people, or fate instead of taking ownership of their choices. Competing in pain allows them to stay in control without ever changing. It's easier to say, "I've been through too much to change," than to admit, "I'm afraid to evolve." Their suffering becomes both their excuse and their shield. In relationships, this pattern slowly erodes connection. What begins as empathy turns into exhaustion. You find yourself censoring your happiness, downplaying your struggles, or carrying the emotional weight of their constant comparisons. It becomes a relationship built on wounds, not wellness, bonded by shared pain, but never mutual growth. Because in their eyes, if you start healing, you're no longer equal. You're abandoning the unspoken pact of misery that kept you close. They compete in pain because it's the only competition they believe they can win. Progress requires courage, self-awareness, and humility, qualities that challenge the ego. But pain, especially when publicly displayed, demands no accountability. It's a form of emotional currency that always earns sympathy, no matter how long it's held on to. So they cling to it, polish it, and display it whenever your light begins to grow too bright. They'd rather be admired for surviving their suffering than forgotten for overcoming it. There are people in your life who never truly leave your side, yet their presence offers no comfort, no encouragement, no warmth. They're there in every moment, physically near, emotionally distant. They attend your milestones, respond to your messages, and maintain the appearance of closeness. But when you look for genuine support, you're met with silence, indifference, or faintly disguised disinterest. Their presence becomes a hollow performance, a way to say, "I was there," without ever actually being there. You can feel it in subtle ways. When you share your ideas, they nod but don't engage. When you express excitement about something new, they offer a half smile or a vague, "That's nice." They show up, but not out of care, out of obligation, image, or curiosity. They want to appear like a good friend, partner, or family member, but the truth is they have no intention of investing emotionally. Their presence becomes a placeholder, an illusion of connection masking emotional withdrawal. This type of relationship often leaves you confused because it's not built on absence. It's built on inconsistency. They never give you a reason to accuse them of neglect, yet something in you always feels unseen. When you fall, they might ask if you're okay, but that their tone lacks sincerity. When you succeed, they might congratulate you, but their eyes don't shine with genuine happiness. It's a strange form of emotional vacancy, where you're surrounded by someone's body, but starved of their spirit. The psychology behind this behavior often lies in emotional detachment and quiet resentment. They don't want to see you fail, but they also don't want to see you rise too high. Your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Your passion exposes their apathy, and your courage highlights their passivity. So they remain in the background, present enough to claim loyalty, distant enough to avoid feeling small. Their neutrality becomes their disguise. They believe that if they don't openly oppose you, they can't be accused of betrayal. But emotional neutrality in the face of someone's growth is a quiet form of betrayal. These people tend to view relationships as stages where appearances matter more than authenticity. They show up to be seen, not to contribute. They attend your celebrations because absence might raise suspicion, not because they genuinely want to witness your joy. They comment on your efforts without ever offering encouragement. They listen to your struggles, but rarely lift a finger to help. Their presence gives the illusion of care, but in truth, they're there to maintain balance in their own narrative, to be seen as the good one, without ever embodying it. Over time, you begin to notice the emotional imbalance. You're the one offering reassurance, celebrating their wins, and providing emotional energy. Yet when your turn comes, their responses feel muted. You realize that while you've been investing, they've been observing. While you've been giving, they've been calculating how much presence is just enough to avoid guilt. They exist beside you, but never with you. Their energy feels passive, almost parasitic, drawing from your light while giving none of their own. When you share your dreams or struggles, their reactions often hover in the gray zone. They don't discourage you, but they don't uplift you either. They might change the subject, offer shallow responses, or divert attention back to themselves. It's as if your emotions are inconvenient reminders of depth they're unwilling to meet. They'd rather stay on the surface where it's safe, where caring doesn't demand vulnerability, where presence doesn't require participation. This kind of emotional distance can be deeply draining because it mimics closeness while denying connection. You start questioning your worth, wondering if you're asking for too much. But the truth is, support isn't about grand gestures. It's about emotional reciprocity. It's about feeling that someone not only stands beside you, but believes in you. And when that belief is missing, presence alone becomes an empty shell. Their silence during your struggles says more than their attendance ever could. Sometimes their lack of support isn't rooted in malice, but in emotional immaturity. They may not know how to express genuine encouragement because they've never received it themselves. They interpret emotional vulnerability as weakness and avoid deep connection out of fear. Yet, regardless of the reason, the result feels the same. You carry the relationship's emotional weight while they coast on proximity. Their presence becomes a comfort for them, not for you. You might even notice how they show up selectively. They're present when it's convenient, when being seen beside you benefits their image, when your success reflects well on them. But in the quiet moments, the unseen hours of self, doubt or exhaustion, they vanish into polite detachment. They're emotionally unavailable, yet physically close, like furniture in a room, visible but lifeless, always there, never truly engaged. The most painful part is realizing that presence without support can hurt more than absence, because absence you can accept. It's clear, it's defined. But false presence gives hope, keeps you reaching for warmth that isn't there. You tell yourself they care, that maybe you're imagining the distance, but deep down you feel the emptiness. Their presence doesn't fill space, it occupies it. It's not connection, it's performance. And no amount of proximity can replace the quiet power of genuine emotional support.